This is Land of Havilah, Isaiah 38. Just a reminder of where we are in Isaiah's ministry. In the opening sentence of the book, Isaiah said he prophesied during the days of kings Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. That list of kings is in chronological order according to 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. So Hezekiah was the last of those kings. He reigned 29 years, 2 Chronicles 29:1, and when Sennacherib attacked, it was in his 14th year. Coming up, Hezekiah learns he's about to die. That doesn't mean we're close to the end of this book. There are 29 more chapters. In the 14th of Hezekiah's 29 years, verse 1, "In those days Hezekiah was sick and near death. Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos, came to him and said to him, Yahweh says, Set your house in order, for you will die and not live. Then Hezekiah turned his face to the wall and prayed to Yahweh and said, Remember now, Yahweh, I beg you, how I've walked before you in truth and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in your sight." Hezekiah wept bitterly. Comment: Hezekiah was so sick he was near death in verse 1. In fact, Isaiah confirmed he would die and told him he should set his house in order. Coming later in verse 6, this crisis arose when the Assyrians were attacking, which puts this event in Hezekiah's 14th year. In verses 2 and 3, Hezekiah could have said, I'm sick to the point of death. Death would be a relief physically, and besides that, we're under attack. I've seen enough. It's better to die now than let the Assyrians get their hands on me. This is perfect timing. Thank you, Yahweh, for this merciful death. But instead he prayed for his life. When he turned to the wall and wept bitterly, it's not that he was a pitiful weakling. There was heroism in it to overcome death and war, and he expected to be the strength of Judah during this time. Verse 4. Then Yahweh's word came to Isaiah, saying, Go and tell Hezekiah, Yahweh, the God of David your father, says, I've heard your prayer. I've seen your tears. Behold, I'll add 15 years to your life. I'll deliver you and this city out of the hand of the king of Assyria, and I'll defend this city. Comment: if Hezekiah hadn't prayed for life, it would definitely been the end of him, and without his faithful leadership, it could have been the end of Judah as well. But because he prayed, Yahweh said, it's not your end, and it's not the end of Judah. That word came through Isaiah. Isaiah says further in verse 7, This shall be the sign to you from Yahweh, that Yahweh will do this thing that he's spoken. Behold, I'll cause the shadow on the sundial, which is gone down on the sundial of Ahaz with the sun, to return backward 10 steps. So the sun returned 10 steps on the sundial on which it had gone down. Comment: as proof that this twofold prophecy is legitimate, that Hezekiah will live 15 more years and Yahweh will defend Jerusalem, Yahweh made the shadow go backward 10 markings on the sundial, or 10 steps on the staircase. Whether it was on a sundial or staircase is a matter of translation. Whichever it was, the sun went backward in verse 8. Coming up, Isaiah recovered and wrote a psalm in memory of the fact that he almost died. Verse 9. The writing of Hezekiah, king of Judah, when he had been sick and had recovered of his sickness. I said, In the middle of my life I go into the gates of Sheol. I'm deprived of the residue of my years. I said, I won't see Yah in the land of the living. I'll see man no more with the inhabitants of the world. My dwelling is removed and is carried away from me like a shepherd's tent. I've rolled up like a weaver my life. He'll cut me off from the loom. From day even to night you'll make an end of me. I waited patiently until morning. He breaks all my bones like a lion. From day even to night you'll make an end of me. Comment in verses 12 and 13, from day even to night you'll make an end of me, meaning he lay there sick day and night, figuring it was the end of him. Yahweh was cutting him off prematurely, he thought in verse 10, depriving him of the residue of his years. In verse 12, my dwelling is removed like a shepherd's tent, meaning God's separating me from my body. It's clear Hezekiah believed there was more to him than his body. He'll enter Sheol in verse 10, which is a place of the dead, but it'll be without his body. Verse 14, I chattered like a swallow or a crane. I moaned like a dove. My eyes weaken, looking upward, Lord. I'm oppressed. Be my security. Comment in verse 14, I chattered like a swallow or a crane. It turns out later in the chapter he had a boil which can cause fever and chills. As his body shook violently, he chattered insensible noises like the chattering of a swallow or crane. Now concerning the prophecy that he would recover and the fact of the recovery, he doesn't know what to say. Verse 15, What will I say? He has both spoken to me and himself has done it. I will walk carefully all my years because of the anguish of my soul. Comment, all his years he'll remember the anguish he experienced on his bed and walk carefully before Yahweh. Being on death's door gave him time to think, and it affected him. Verse 16, Lord, men live by these things, and my spirit finds life in all of them. You restore me and cause me to live. Comment, Hezekiah says, when men experience one of these things, they turn to God and find life. Sometimes a situation like this enhances life. A man comes out better than he was before. Maybe he even gains eternal life in his contemplation of death. Hezekiah said, My spirit finds life in all of them, meaning he finds life-giving instruction in all his difficult experiences. Verse 17, Behold, for peace I had great anguish, but you have in love for my soul delivered it from the pit of corruption, for you've cast all my sins behind your back. For Sheol can't praise you, death can't celebrate you, those who go down into the pit can't hope for your truth. The living, he shall praise you, as I do today. The Father shall make known your truth to the children. Yahweh will save me, therefore we'll sing my songs with stringed instruments all the days of our life in Yahweh's house. Comment, that's the end of Hezekiah's psalm. And verse 17, For peace I had great anguish, which means I was in anguish about the situation, but God delivered me and cast all my sins behind his back. He didn't treat me according to his sins. In verse 18, Sheol can't praise you, death can't celebrate you, those who go down into the pit can't hope for your truth, end quote. In Jesus' time, it must have been verses like these that the Sadducees quoted to argue there was no resurrection, Matthew 22:23. It's true Hezekiah implied there would be unconsciousness, but he didn't say there would be no recovery from that unconsciousness. Isaiah said, Awake and sing, you who dwell in the dust. Why would they need to awake unless they were unconscious? So unconsciousness doesn't mean there's no resurrection. Now a couple of notes at the end of the chapter to backtrack and fill in more detail, verse 21. Now Isaiah has said, Let them take a cake of figs and lay it for a poultice on the boil, and he shall recover. Isaiah also had said, What's the sign that I'll go up to Yahweh's house? Comment in verse 21, Isaiah said, Use a cake of figs for a poultice. So there was a combination of medicine and faith. In a separate detail in verse 22, Hezekiah asked Isaiah for a sign, something to reassure him the prophecy was true, so the sign was the product of his asking. Let's not get carried away asking for signs, because the asking tests God's patience, Judges 6:39 and Luke 1:18-20. Isaiah 39 is next.